let's go ahead and call this special meeting of the Academic Committee to order. It is being done by video conferencing, and let's just go through very quickly who all is in attendance. So Mr. Mel Campbell, Ms. Kathy Robine, Dr. Stratos, Dr. Campbell, Ms. McKenzie. The county channel is streaming this, and Molly Mercado is facilitating the technology part of this meeting. Okay.
I do think Swinton will be joining us.
Who will, Dr. Campbell?
LaKentia Swinton.
Okay.
I think she's coming on now. I heard it beep.
Okay, I see that that Wendy Cartledge has joined us. And okay, great. Well, let's go ahead, and if we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, thank you. All right. To start with, we need to approve the agenda. The agenda, basically the main focus of it is to review the student code of conduct. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move. Okay, I second.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell moves to approve the agenda with a second by Ms. Kathy Robine. All in, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, unanimous. You got that, Molly?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, Molly, do we have any public comments?
We do not.
Okay, then we'll keep moving on to the review of the student code of conduct. So I'm turning this over to Dr. Campbell, and look forward to reviewing this. It's having reviewed the 172 pages, I believe, that's obvious that a lot of work was put into this. And so before we even start, I would just like to thank the whole team, all the people involved in this for this endeavor. Hello, Ms. Swinton, nice to see you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. So first of all, just again, want to thank everybody for this document, for the effort that was put into this, and we look forward to the next couple hours of discussing it. So Dr. Campbell? You're on mute right now?
Muted.
Yeah, I know. I apologize. I was trying to share it and then move my screen over so I can see while I'm talking. How are y'all? How is everyone today?
Good.
Good.
All right. So we're going to get started. Ms. Fidricks, you pretty much summed up with my first slide that I wanted to publicly thank everyone for their hard work in trying to accomplish this huge task. And I definitely want to publicly thank Karen McKenzie 2 years ago for taking this on as our Teacher of the Year, as something that she wanted to do for our district as well as our students that we serve. So I just want to publicly thank her for putting this ball into motion. All right, before I go, I want to make sure that everyone can see the slides. Everyone can see that? Okay, perfect. So I always like to start with a quote, and I think this quote kind of summarizes our work. Knowledge can come by taking things apart, but wisdom comes from putting things back together. And I think all of the stakeholders that were involved in this process are are both knowledgeable and wise, because we've taken it apart and we're trying to put this back together so that it serves our students. So I want to begin by just sharing that in May of 2017, our state department passed a regulation for all local schools to have a minimum standard of student conduct and disciplinary enforcement procedures. And the purpose behind this was to establish some sort of uniformity among how we address discipline in our South Carolina schools. And this was passed in May 26th of 2017. So this kind of gives us our framework of why the urgency was there for Ms. McKenzie as Teacher of the Year 2 years ago to get this ball rolling, making sure that Beaufort County was in compliance with the new state reg. So we've done a lot of work. Our work started a year and a half ago. And with that being said, many of our administrators were accustomed to a one-page document, and we'll talk further about that. And so our work was basically to first be in compliance with the state codes, making sure that all of our codes that we used all of our state codes. The document that our assistant principals and principals used did not embrace all of the codes. So that was the first work, making sure that we had all of our codes, defining those codes, and then moving forward. And we'll talk more about the different levels, but at this point, this was the progression toward where we are right now. I do want to emphasize a few things about the document. So in the document, you will see 13 administrative regs that we included, that we felt that it was important to see and make sure that we had common language. So it's not that our code of conduct was saying one thing and then our administrative regs were saying something else. So in the document, you will see 13 administrative regs that we addressed in the code of conduct. I do want to preface by saying that some of the administrative regs are being reviewed and updated, and I think that will come forth next week. So what we did, we kept the regs as they are, and once those regs are updated, we will then update that in our document. We did not want to put what we thought the reg should be in it without being approved or informed by the board first. So I do want to preface that. So the legal counsel, along with instructional services, we're working with Ms. Cartledge and making sure that the administrative regs are updated and aligned to our discipline plan. So again, 13 administrative regs that we pulled out of the document that will be aligned to our matrix. And I think that is coming forth to you next week. Is that right, Dr. Stratos?
That is correct. I believe at our next academic committee, if we can, we haven't set the agenda. I was hoping that would come out from our meeting today, Dr. Campbell, as well as Wendy bringing forward the request for the AR corrections.
All right, so I do want to tell you that we do recognize that there are old or administrative regs that need to be updated, and we are working behind the scenes on that, but we wanted to follow a proper process with the board as we adjust and make updates to those administrative regs.
I'll speak a little bit about the timeline that we went through. Kind of started in February of 2019. I took over the district teacher forum and asked the teachers what do they consider to be their biggest concern. Overwhelmingly, that ended up being discipline. Just to make sure that we vetted those results with all of the teachers throughout the district, we put out a teacher survey to all teachers. We were able to get 1,074 responses, which we felt really confident that we had a good base to go from. About 89.6% of those teachers felt like discipline was a concern for us. So obviously that's where we put our attention. We started out with research really within that forum, kind of what are other people doing? What are people within South Carolina doing, and what are people around the country doing at work? And we looked at a lot of different models. We also took this to the Teacher Advisory Council, which, as you know, the Advisory Council is a 3-year service by all of the top 5 teacher nominees for each year. So that's a really comprehensive group that has some longevity to it. They felt we were on the right track. From that point, we went to our newly formed Beaufort County School District Professional Advocacy Council, which includes the SCA, the BCEA, the PTSA. It also has support staff on there. So that we felt was a really good place when, again, we were told we were on the right track. At that point, we of course came to the board in April of 2019 and asked for permission to proceed with this. And we were given a lot of support and thankfully some direction. I remember at that meeting, Mr. Schrodinger bringing up the need for intervention, and that really kind of spurred us in a whole new direction, which I'm eternally grateful for. That summer, Wendy Cartledge and I spent the summer doing that crosswalk that Dr. Campbell was just referring to on updating codes. That took us some time. We had to look at codes at the state level, what was currently in place on our discipline matrix, and what was in Educator's Handbook that teachers and administrators had access to. From there, we at that point, we had Dr. Stratos join the district, so we had some true leadership at this point, and gratefully so. She was able to reach out to Dr. Campbell, who started to put together a district-wide focus for us, which was phenomenal. In that group, it went to the principals in September for the first time. It has gone back to them multiple times. But it went to a committee that was really involved stakeholders from every aspect of our district. We had behavior management specialists, social workers, guidance counselors, Dr. White representing our special ed department, Carmen Dillard was part of it, Melissa Murray came in, Dr. Campbell was there, Ms. Clinton was there. Just a huge array of people coming together. What's right for Beaufort County School District students? That group met multiple times, and what their focus was really looking at how is this going to work at the school level. So they were able to give a lot of input. Those edits and changes would go back to Dr. Stratos, who would then kind of pick it apart at a higher level for us. After all of that work was done, it went back to the teacher forum where it started. The teacher forum were able to, I set it up kind of as a gallery walk, and they were able to give input and make suggestions. It went back to the Teacher Advisory Council and back to the PAC as well. So at this point, we really feel like all the stakeholders have been able to have input. There is one little piece that, due to the COVID closures, we had slated for it to go in front of our school improvement in March.
Karen,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry. It seems you're going in and out at times, and I do apologize.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, and I'm either that or I'm really getting a little deep.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Stratos. I was just going to say that I think we're missing a little bit of what you're saying, Karen. Maybe just speak closer to your
Okay.
computer.
Thank
I'll
you.
lean in a little bit. Is this better?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The piece that, due to the closures in March, we were slated to go to school improvement committees and kind of have parents input at that point. Because of closures, we weren't able to do that as systematically as we had hoped. But all other pieces of the plan that we presented in April of 2019 to the board have been adhered to. So we feel good about where we are in the process and how teachers and administrators and all of the different stakeholders within our district have been able to have a voice.
Karen, if I may ask a question here, in this process, it sounds like there was a tremendous amount of input from several different views and through different lenses. Were there any students involved in any of this?
Students were not brought in at this level. That would have gone at the same time as the school improvement committees. We would have probably reached out at that point, but with the closures, we had to adapt and kind of change our focus on what we're looking at now with slide 8 is this is the purpose of a progressive discipline plan. It's more than just the matrix of consequences and interventions. It's more comprehensive and allows really a standard to be conveyed to parents and students, not only what we expect, but kind of what the overall result of those standards would be for us. And this is just a guideline. And that's really important because every student in every situation is unique. So it is not okay, we're at this place, we check this box. That's not what this is about. This is more just a framework and guideline, not a prescribed action for everyone.
If I may just interject one more time, typically when we conduct the academic committee meetings, it's a little bit less formal. So Mr. Campbell, Ms. Robine, if anybody needs to say something, please just jump in, and I can see how difficult it is to try to listen and monitor the hands being raised in the participants section. So please just, everybody, just jump in if you have something to say.
Slide 9 is that diversity federal regulation slide. Diversity, of course, is federal regulated for us, and we want to make sure we adhere to not only ethnicity, religion, but all aspects of diversity within our district. So, and within our communities. So that is part of this matrix. FERPA, those are rights and privacy laws, of course, that all educators have to adhere to, and that has also been part of this matrix. Students in special education, the IDEA legislation is also a part of this. We know that we have to look at each individual situation and each individual student. So we wanted to make sure those federal regulations were also a part of this. And this just goes to some of those, just so you can kind of see what we're talking about. State regulations, of course, around attendance. So you'll notice within the whole progressive matrix that we have talked a lot about truancy in attendance, sexual harassment, the bullying, tobacco and drug-free campuses. Those are all state things. Locally, of course, we have dress code that we expect to be adhered to. We are thankfully a one-to-one for most of our students, so we have that acceptable use policy. And of course, student conduct on buses we expect here in Beaufort County. So we wanted to make sure those things were outlined as well. think this goes to Ms. Swinton.
Morning, everyone. I hope that
I'm sorry, Miss Swinton, you're like talking through a tin can right now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You may have to chime in on this until I get my
No,
Yeah, it's not coming in. So I'll take it, Kiki. Because we can't really hear you. All right, so in the document, we addressed the interventions at the school level. In the document, we talked about the social emotional framework, the multi-tiered system of support, and the expectations of positive school climate, which falls under our South Carolina Climate Act, Positive Climate Act, which is a part of our SS 23 administrative regs. So in our social emotional framework, Beaufort County has partnered with Panorama. And I wish Kiki was on here because she did a lot of the legwork in getting that part instituted so that we will have lessons, social and emotional lessons for our teachers, as well as a framework in common language. So you will find that on page 49 of the document, and I don't want to like read it, but it basically talks about our partnership with Panorama and also how we are going to address our social emotional needs of our students within our district. It also talks about that on page 49 of the document, our multi-tiered system of support, making sure that we have that tier 1 classroom managed support for our students. And so we touched on that in the document. We know that it's important that we have these frameworks and processes in place because if we don't, it really impacts our disciplinary systems. So that was really what we wanted to kind of cover in that slide. Kiki, did I miss anything?
I just let her back in. She tried to re-enter.
All right.
I'm not sure if you all can hear me or not.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. I apologize.
I summed up that page for you, so we can move on to the next slide.
Okay. All right, so.
Before we do, yeah, Ms. Swinton, I think that Dr. Campbell referenced that you did a lot of work with the Panorama education and the SEL aspect. Could you just say a little more about that?
Sure. So myself, there was actually a team of us that have reviewed quite a few different SEL platforms to be able to support students. We know with the COVID closures that a lot of our students have experienced situations that really are unimaginable and make it difficult to return to the regular school environment. So what we wanted to do was try to meet those needs, not necessarily just outside of the classroom, but also in the classroom so that they can be able to perform. So we have vetted a few different programs and decided that Panorama Education actually met the needs of what we were looking for. Dr. White was a participant, Melissa Murray, Carmen Diller, Jerry Henderson, Nakia Campbell, and myself all reviewed different programs to make sure that what we needed, which was something that we could provide a universal screener for the social emotional needs of students, but also be able to provide interventions along with the results of those screeners. So we don't want to screen students without being able to intervene for the students. So Panorama met the needs, and so the team made a recommendation to Dr. Stratos, and we are moving forward, preparing to be able to launch that at the start of the school year with training for our classroom teachers, school counselors, social workers, behavior management specialists. Pretty much everyone that will touch a student will have access to training and professional development with regards to social and emotional needs of students and how to be able to support those needs.
So, Mrs. Fridrich, if I may add, and we recognize that the training may have to be virtual. So that is also part of the negotiation of price. So we recognize that travel is not incurred. So we're trying to make sure that we can get the best for our dollar as we're working with our vendors. And we do want a district-wide model so that my school, your school, and Mr. Campbell's school, Mrs. Robine, we're all on the same page to start out, instead of my school doing X, your school doing Y, and I'm a kid who transfers from A to B. We don't want to keep the children kickstarting.
Can you give me an example of, we've done the screening and a need is identified. What type of need might be identified, and what type of lesson, or is it a student, independent lesson? Is it a teacher-led lesson? What exactly is the response?
Do you want me to take that, Dr. Stratus, or did you want to?
Keek, if you can, because it gets to be it starts to be a little prescriptive from the whole classroom to the individual with the resources. Yes, ma'am.
So that was one of the questions that we asked as we reviewed Panorama's program. We wanted to be able to look at it, not just from a classroom view, an individual student view, but also from a school-wide view, as well as a district view. Okay, what are we seeing as a trend with our students that we need to focus on? Where are we seeing those needs where we have students who may have experienced some, abuse, neglect situations, and they're just not prepared to return to the regular school environment, whether that's virtual or in the actual classroom. So if you have a student who may have experienced a loss due to COVID, and they may be traumatized by just even the conversation around coronavirus and the COVID closure, you have a prescriptive based on that child's SEL summary. So once they take the survey, so what will happen initially is they will be provided a survey, and that will give the classroom teacher a single student view, but also a classroom view, so that they know how to focus the work that they're doing around SEL to be able to support those students. And for students who, if we classify them on a red, yellow, and green based on their needs, for students who are in that yellow and red category, we're able to provide more intensive interventions through our school counselors, our social workers, and our behavior management specialists to be able to support those additional needs. So it's, you'll have some students who will just, your tier 1 students who will just need to provide that universal support for everyone. But then you'll have some students who will rise to a higher level of additional services that will be needed. So that's where having that survey to identify those needs by student is important. And that's why we felt like Panorama was going to meet our needs as far as drilling down to the individual student level and providing that support. I hope that answered your question.
A little bit. I'm wondering, do we have to have parental permission to give this type of survey to our students?
No, ma'am. This is it.
Okay.
This is it. Go ahead, Dr. Stratus. I'm sorry.
It's also a state requirement to do screeners. So we will fall under our jurisdiction of practice.
Okay.
But parents do need to be made aware of the results if things come up. That's where that other communication component comes into play, as well as from our side that we know not to, let's fall on the FERPA. We don't discuss the results of these surveys within the classroom as well,
Okay.
There's a few layers that we have to discuss with teachers as well.
So Ms. Swinton, the idea then is that every student will take this screener so that the teacher will get a classroom view, the principal will get a school-wide view, and the district will get a district view. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And so initially the plan when we met with Panorama was to work with our assessment team to do the initial assessment, work with the classroom teachers to be able to view the results and how they need to support those students. And then for those students who rise to a higher level, that's when we bring in the additional staff, our school counselors, social workers, behavior management specialists, and school psychologists if necessary.
And this will be, the surveys will be for those students that also choose to do the parents that choose for their students to do distant learning if we have that model?
Yes, ma'am. All of the surveys are web-based, so all students will have access to it, whether virtual or in the classroom.
Okay. And our K to 2 students that don't, will they be surveyed? How will that happen?
That I'm not sure of. I don't want to tell you incorrectly. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Stratus. I see you raising your hand.
Mark is working at having devices for our K2 students without incurring costs by recycling devices from the upper grades and pushing them down. So that is something that we are working district-wide to have that availability.
Okay.
We're in this, we need, Mrs. Rovine, we need that flexibility.
And
we're
I
trying
would assume the survey that you're going to give a student that's in K2 is looks a little different than the survey you're going to give a student that's in 10th grade.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
It's an age appropriate survey. Yes.
Okay, great. All right.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
How did you make that selection for Panorama? Did I see somewhere where their anticipation of level 1 average is like 80, 90%, and the other 10% would be in either level 2 or level 3? Am I incorrect?
I think what you're referring to is the multi-tiered systems of support. So that's where 80% of students will respond to the universal supports that are provided through tier 1. And then you may 10 or 15, potentially 20% that may require tier 2 or tier 3 intervention through the MTSS process. Used to be
how does our district relate to that typical, that standardization of the MTSS? I mean, do we typically have 80% of our children, who are, quote, average tier 1 students?
So,
and if that is the case, then did we select this interventionist as based on that, or no? That's my first question.
So I think Dr. Stratus wanted to respond with regards to the MTSS and where we fall with the tiers, and then I'll chime in on the selection.
Well, what I was trying to do is get a point of clarification with the question. So if we're looking at our existing discipline data to determine how many students had fallen into level 1 and did not go to the next level, looking at prior trends for our school district. So that's kind of the question that I'm posturing to each of us, right? So when we came up with these threshold numbers, that's the question of how do we get to that? Was that by looking at prior discipline data and seeing that this amount of students did not progress to the next levels?
Well, I really want to know whether you looked at it from a cross-reference standpoint, because it's not based just on discipline, it's also based on academics. Is that true?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Yes.
I also have a question as well.
So
Okay, Mr. Campbell's not finished yet, I don't think.
Did you decide that on our prior data? And did you select this panoramic group based on our data versus what was normal, data for this particular intervention program we have?
Yes, sir. So what the team did, and that's why we had a team that looked at it from every aspect. So we included Dr. White because she's working with a significant disproportionality. We included Melissa Murray, Carmen Dillard, Jerry Henderson to look at those academic areas. And then myself, Dr. Campbell also looked at it from that social emotional lens of providing that outside additional support. So we did look at what does our data look like, and to be able to ensure that we're making a decision that's going to best meet the needs of our students. We all vetted from our different areas of expertise to ensure that what we're providing to our students actually does meet their needs, and it's not just a one size fits all. So a number of the different platforms that we looked at generally provide that academic support, the behavioral support, but we want to take it a step further and meet those needs of our students, have that individual intervention, and then bring in the additional support through MTSS and RTI. So this program, Panorama, does work with the programs that we use, which is Enrich, which keeps our MTSS and RTI plans, as well as our special education data. So we wanted to get a program that we could merge into and be able to pull that data to be able to look at how we're providing these interventions and are they making an actual impact to students so that we can progress monitor and adjust if necessary.
Okay, thank you. I got a couple follow-up questions on that later on, but I'll wait until we get to that.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Smith?
I'm sorry, I don't know if we should maybe at another time schedule, and I don't know, maybe Dr. Stratus can schedule us to have Panorama present to the academic committee.
Well, that's not necessary. You told me you vetted it well, so I just want to, it's not necessary.
Okay.
Mr. Smith, you had a question?
Yeah, my question is, one of my concerns is anytime when we talk about the students' behavior, or we talk about academics along with any behavior things, is that I was wondering why didn't we have Dr. White here as well, maybe a social worker as well. Because, when you talk about the social and emotional piece, you talk about the behavioral structure, there's a lot of times when IEPs are involved. And when IEPs are involved, you're talking about the law. And there's a lot of times I get called from parents talking about we are in violation of their kids because there are only a certain amount of days that kids can be suspended. And even though those are things that might have been spoken upon y'all, there's still legal ramifications that I don't think that even Wendy may be knowledgeable of. Even I think I do see Wendy on this call. But at the same time, I do believe that we do need the director of special ed on this conference call because of the fact that there are different measurements that must be taken as well when it deals with special ed students when it comes to code of conduct.
Mr. Smith, I think Dr. Campbell or Dr. Stratos could allay some of your concerns. At the initial portion of this meeting, it was told about how the special education director was involved in this, and there is.
All due respect, I did hear that. I was on the phone. I was on the phone. And I did hear that, but like I said, there are questions that I would like to possibly ask them indirectly and get an understanding of some of these concerns versus asking Dr. Scrabble or Dr. Campbell because of the fact that that's their department indirectly and they deal with those and they know the law in tune, find more than Dr. Campbell and Dr. Scrabble because of the fact that is almost like an attorney, like certain law. They may all be lawyers, but certain lawyers take upon certain law or like an IEP or special ed for their department. That's what they specialize in. And so
Mr. Smith, I would recommend that if you have some specific questions right now, why don't you just ask them? Dr. Stratos can try to answer them along with her team. And if not, then they can get back to us. So what exactly are your questions?
All due respect, once again, Mrs. Fidrich, I don't want to neglect my point. My point of bringing this up is not just to saying that they may ask the question. I think when we have these conversations moving forward, as a board member, I'm saying that I think that having the director of SPED is important to be on these type of calls for a certain reason. So I don't want to negate what I'm saying. I'm not knocking anyone. I'm saying as a board member and me having the IEP as a student and understanding the do's and don'ts and the different things and getting calls as a board member, I'm saying moving forward that I think that it would be good for us to have the SPED director involved. I'm not negating the work that they have done as a committee. I'm not doing that. They've done a good job, but I'm saying as a member, as a board member, I think that a couple more people need to have chairs at the table. That's my point.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that clarification.
That's just my opinion. We all have opinions.
Mr. Smith, thank you for that clarification. I misunderstood. I thought you said you had some questions. So it is a point well taken. And Dr. Stratos, perhaps in the future, it would be a great idea to invite Dr. White because of Mr. Smith's points.
Can I say something?
Of course.
I do think that the plan does an excellent job of delineating what is necessary to happen when kids have IEPs or 504 plans in the discipline. I was happy to see that it was written out quite clearly about the 10 days and what it means for students when we're talking about suspension. So I just would like to say that I was happy to see that in the plan and thought it was pretty, it was nice to see that it was specifically addressed in the plan.
Yeah, there's evident in the plan that those things that Will is alluding to have been vetted to a degree, because they even distinguish the differences between 504 and special ed, which a lot of people, sometimes dismiss as the same. But
exactly.
You really have to dig deep into what was done before you can, understand where we are today. Anyway.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Stratos.
So if I could add, because that was one of our very large concerns, a significant amount of time was spent addressing our IDEA, SPED, a significant amount of time with Dr. White. We, to the point of wordsmithing, so that if I'm an administrator who is new to discipline, we want this document to be, anything you need to know is going to be in this document. Let's make sure, and we're going to train you so that you have point of reference. Dr. White was significantly involved in the development of the plan because we want to be assured that we are following the letter of the law. So, and I have asked her to come by into my office. She is involved in a conference call down the hallway right now.
Thank you, Dr. Stratos.
Thank you. And also, if I can just jump right in one more time. I've had a parent liaison contact me even on yesterday, Dr. Stratos, saying that over the COVID-19 epidemic, that their student is still required or owed some hours, and that their student didn't get the amount of hours required, and that they feel that the student has been lacking, and that was a problem. And so there are things like that where I don't get into the nitty gritty of it, but those are great concerns, if that makes sense. Especially when they say that, go ahead.
If you could please share when it comes to either extended school year, because we do have that operating right now, or compensatory time, please have that parent contact us. Specifically, Dr. White has been putting an exceptional amount of time to be aligned on compensatory time so that we can meet the needs of our students. The team has been working hard. This team has been here all summer, Mr. Smith. So if she could just reach out to us, so if you want to reach out to me and share, I will make sure that type of information gets conveyed to the parent and they can look into her needs.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Stratos. Okay. All right, if we could continue on the code of conduct.
All right, so just transitioning from interventions to our alternative education regulations. Ms. Swinton.
Okay, so just we wanted to included in the code of conduct, you'll see is a very descriptive with regards to the Promising Student Program, right choices in the adult education program. These are alternatives to be able to support students who need additional support outside of what we're providing in the traditional classroom. So we do have promising students available for students in grades 2 through 5. Myself and Mrs. Dillard will still be responsible for reviewing those applications and ensuring that the schools have provided those additional supports. So some of the additional interventions that will be provided through the social emotional lens will also be included in the reviewing and vetting of those applications. And then we will have the recommendations for alternative placement through Right Choices program And for those students who need something that are 17 years and older, they need that additional support of adult education. We have that as an alternative education program that's available.
Ms. Swinton, before we leave the panorama, the SEL screener, I'd like to ask another question.
Sure.
Is the screener based more on our circumstances with COVID and the students' emotional health around that, or is it more of a general screener that would be used in any situation to assess emotional competencies?
So the survey is kind of a combination of both. It is a general screener, but they have added questions that are related to the needs of students identified through the COVID closures. So we recognize that this is not a traditional time. These are unusual circumstances for everyone, and we just can't expect children to operate as normal. So we wanted to make sure that any program that we went with, that they were focusing on the COVID closures and everything that's related to that. So you've got children who are worried about, where meals are going to come from, making sure that they're meeting the time requirements for their academic requirements, what's going to happen, the question of, am I going back to school? Am I not going back to school? So we want to make sure that this program meets those needs. They will work with our team to identify any additional questions that we want specifically related to Beaufort County. We actually have a meeting with them scheduled on Tuesday to start that conversation about tailoring that survey to meet our county specifically. So it's not just as we said earlier, a one size fits all.
Okay, excellent. And then as a follow-up to Mr. Campbell's question, if I'm understanding it correctly, he questioned about the percentage of students that would be in each tier. And are those numbers, the 80 to 90% in tier 1, applicable to, has it been normed out that the SEL screeners will show that 80 to 90% are in tier 1, or is that the academic standard?
That's academic and behavioral. Our data may look a little bit different, but again, we won't know what that screener result will be until we actually do the screening. We have not done a social emotional screener at the universal level for all of our students yet. So we have to wait and see what that data is going to look like.
But Panorama's experience and what they shared with you is that those numbers are fairly accurate as a norm. It was norm referenced, and that 80 to 90% based on their data will fall in that tier 1.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This goes back to just show us kind of where we were when the teacher forum had a concern about discipline. And as you can see here, it was basically a checklist. It was a one size fits all. We didn't feel like it was fair for all students of the district. We like the fact that it is now by levels. If you just think about a basic thing that a student may do, if a kindergarten student bites someone, that's viewed a lot differently than if an 8th grader bites someone. So they needed to be delineated out for that purpose. So that was one reason why we wanted to get away from where we were into more a progressive discipline.
Most of our administrators, they are familiar with the green card, the one pager. And I think this is our work in training, shifting that mental model from making a quick decision about discipline with students to making having a comprehensive approach to that. So we have to shift that model. It's not going to be a one pager where you just make a decision. We wanted to make sure that our consequences were developmentally appropriate, that it was aligned to our federal and local and state regs. So all of these measures are things that we definitely need to embed in the training that we will provide for administrators.
And it does definitely look more overwhelming now, but it is more comprehensive and meets the needs of all students.
and it's not just about the discipline consequence, it's about the support and the interventions that we mentioned. All that's a part of this process, this system. How do we develop great kids? So it's not just the discipline consequence, but it's also the support and intervention as well.
Correct, and this kind of goes back to the pieces that Mr. Campbell and Mr. Smith were discussing as well. Bringing in, looking at this, at the special ed population, looking at FERPA rules and things like that, all of it being inclusive.
We had a one shoe fits all scenario with this green card. We looked at every kid with this green card. The green card also did not allow for all of the state codes. That's something that I want to emphasize. Some of our codes were missing. So assistant principals or principals had to make decisions. What code is this? How did the kid violate? So we have to shift our mind away from the one pager and really look at this comprehensively.
This refers to the fact that we have gone to the 3 levels that is based on the state's compilation of laws, regulations. One of the critical pieces for teachers was the understanding that level 1 behavioral misconduct used to be considered disorderly, now it's behavior misconduct. Those are classroom managed teacher behaviors. So teachers are responsible for level 1 behavior. Now the state does have a caveat. If that is an egregious, if it is repetitive, those kind of things can move that behavior to a level 1. But level 1, as seen by the state of South Carolina, are managed within the classroom. So a teacher is going to equate that to a minor incident in educator's handbook rather than an administrative referral to their administration. And I think we have some of those examples for you so you can kind of see, if I'm not mistaken.
Kathy, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. So the level 1 behaviors, they still have numbers assigned to them, correct? So is the teacher, who's responsible for getting that data? As I read the plan, it seemed like one of the aspects of the plan was that the data would be collected regarding student infractions based on, the input of the number. Each infraction has numbers that are assigned by the state. Those are, I believe I'm correct about that, right? That those numbers come from the state.
Yeah.
So if it's a classroom level, those level 1, then how do those numbers get inputted into the database?
So we have.
That is a great question.
Go ahead, Karen.
Great question, and that goes back to educator's handbook.
Yes.
When a teacher is doing dealing with a classroom behavior, Johnny keeps tapping his pencil, disturbing everyone else. They may contact a parent, as they should, but they also need to enter that into educator's handbook as a minor incident, and those codes have been crosswalked as part of that journey that Ms. Hartledge and I took last summer. So those codes are up to date with the state, and we will be able as a district to look at that data. We just have to be consistent in making sure that level 1 is understood as a teacher classroom managed behavior. And they have that next level that they have to do by entering it as a minor incident into educator's handbook. That will allow us to track that data.
Well, will we be able to track?
Oh, sorry.
Will we be able to track it to individual schools?
Yes, sir.
Individual schools, individual classrooms, sir.
Yes.
Okay. I think, you had something like that already, but I just want to make sure that we can follow it down to the classroom level.
Yes, sir. We do have the educator's handbook now, and minor incidences have always been there. We're going back to that consistency piece. With this particular program that we put together with the support we have from the district leadership now, it's a requirement that teachers enter those minor incidents into educator handbook.
Yeah, I can see that being very, very important.
Yes, sir.
So Ms. McKenzie, so let's say a student in first period has an offense, and then a student in that same student in third period has a similar infraction. And by the end of the day, there's been 3 occurrences by that same student, but with different teachers. I guess, several questions. How does one handle that? Is this putting more of a burden on teachers to document minor offenses? I mean, can you address some of those questions?
I would love to. The great thing about Educator's Handbook is it's a quick process. The teacher can pull it up, keep it up consistently throughout the day. As students move into their less guided, more independent practice, you can go over and very quickly say, Johnny's tapping his pencil. That does track that student, and teachers will be able to put their roles in. So if I'm teaching and I have that same Johnny the next period, I know that that teacher first period had an issue with the same behavior. So by the end of the day, if I'm putting it in and I see he's had it all day long, that's probably a point in time where we as teachers need to have mom come in, maybe sit down with that student and talk about a plan that we can work to alleviate that behavior. It is something that teachers are going to have to do. I know it is another piece. I've been a teacher for a long time. I know we have a lot on our plate. It's a quick action. And one thing that I noticed with the teachers that were already faithfully doing it, we saw those behaviors lessen more quickly because they were being addressed and it didn't escalate as much. Okay, so he's been tapping his pencil all day long. By the end of the day, we realize that this is something. Rather than that teacher saying, stop, 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 and 2 days later it becomes not a minor incident, but a classroom disruption and moves on into that disruptive misconduct at level 2. So this really, yes, it adds more to the teacher's plate, but for the good of the student and the learning environment.
Ms. McKenzie, can I also add to that? But this is where having a student who's tapping his pencil first period, second period, third period, this may be an indication that something has happened in the home and this student, them. So you've got teachers who are now trained in the social emotional needs of students to be able to identify this is not a normal behavior for Johnny. So maybe I need to bring in someone who can assist. Maybe you need to talk to the behavior management specialist or the school counselor or social worker to identify what the root cause of the issue is and be able to provide those supports. So this is where you see all of these things kind of tying in together, having those social emotional needs, that additional support, meeting the MTA or creating a plan for the student with a tier 2 maybe for behavior or academic. So this is where all of these things kind of tie in together to be able to support students. So it's not just on the classroom teacher to deal with it alone.
Yeah, right, that's a very good point because, I mean, many times a classroom teacher might find that that is normal for Johnny. And how are we going to deal with it? So, and a lot of times it's the other part of it. The cross-reference is important. I like that idea. But follow through is now Dr. Stratus's domain to make sure that that third teacher is documenting and have observed the first 2 teachers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Dr. Stratus?
So if I may, and to pick up where Mr. Campbell opened up the door. So if we take the perspective, recognizing that level 1 are parking tickets, and that police officer lends me the opportunity, well, Mary, you kind of shouldn't have been here. Well, Mary, and as it progresses, it goes to a speeding ticket. That's when it goes to administration. But we have to recognize that that's the language we have to utilize with our principals. And that's the language from our principals have to utilize with our teachers, because we're putting in, as you have gone through the code, you recognize that at level 1, parent notification, school counselors, it is a constant, it's consistent at practice. So we don't go from 0 to 100 on Mary, because today's the day that I am tapping. And the behavior changes that we have to push to our principals is the fact that this documentation must be ongoing, because if you're pushing a child to alternative ed, the person at hearing, I'm looking at having them be charged with the MTSS behavior part. So they're going to be looking now saying, I don't see the documentation. Remember, we had the training. So I'm trying to put in some checks and balances so that we have a little more consistency of practice.
I wanted to add, Dr. Stratos in the team, the level 1s are classroom and teacher managed, but it's also not removing the student from the classroom. ISS, OSS, we're trying to embed those interventions that the kids still remain in the classroom. They're not being removed from the instructional process. So I do want to add that part. That's to differentiate between the other levels. Level 1, and if you look in the matrix, you will find that the goal is to keep the kid in the classroom. That is managed in the classroom by the teacher.
Ms. Cartledge, did you have your hand up? Wendy, I see that your hand is up. Did you want to say something?
Mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Now you can hear me now. No, I had my hand up earlier, and I just wanted everybody to be aware that I have worked very closely with Dr. White and the members of the team with regard to this administrative reg SS 16 discipline of students with disabilities. And Mr. Smith, I just wanted to thank you for your comments. And I wanted you to know that we are improving this AR to make sure that these children are identified early and that they receive their functional behavior assessment or other evaluations that are needed to be done. So, Mr. Smith, if you have any other concerns, if you just let Dr. White me know. I had my hand up for a while. I don't mean to get you all off track of where we are right now, but I just wanted you all to know that we've been working on there. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Dr. Stratos and Dr. Campbell, the whole team. Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
So I have worked with Educators Handbook, and like, you know, Ms. McKenzie said, it's not a difficult program. Sometimes it was very difficult to stroll through all those codes and try to pick the right code to put in which infraction, you know, it resembled most. But it still is definitely an extra, the burden's on the teacher. So is there a stopgap where maybe at the end of the day, the assistant principal gets a printout or some way to be able to assist in that, so that they will say, hey, listen, I noticed that Sally, you know, had this infraction all day long, you know, and I'm going to call the parent, or is there going to be some help to the teachers, because this will only work as well as the documentation. And I'm just wondering if there could not be an AP, or is there some other way that it can help monitor some of this and take the burden off of the teacher at the end of the day?
So, Mrs. Friedrich, just from the seat from having been at school sites, I think the first point of information has to come from the classroom teacher. And then the administrator has to be monitoring data, supporting the teacher, and at times that they do the phone call, that first phone call and that continued phone call with the teacher. But it's very hard for a third party to have that conversation as parents start asking specific questions if it's a classroom management. And again, we're talking about the classroom level. That monitoring of data has to be something that happens ongoing for every school site. That is probably the most key part for all of this as a principal to know, is, you know, what I'm doing. Is it working? Is it not working, right? In order to be part of that continuous improvement model, the school leadership has to be monitoring this as well. And that is part of our PD as we roll out to the school sites. It, changed, it just doesn't happen. You have to monitor, look, and have conversation with your leadership team. That is critical.
Right, I agree. And so perhaps I was not clear enough. I was not saying that the assistant principal would be the one to make the phone call, because I totally agree with you. It has to be the classroom teacher.
Okay. And I apologize.
No. I'm sure that I was just trying to be somewhat succinct, although I know I'm not ever.
Yes, you are.
So I just want, is there going to be a level so the teacher, yes, should be the first contact, but the teacher may not have seen, like if you're the first period teacher, you're not going to know by the end of the day that this child has been written up 3 times. I'm just wondering, is there going to be that oversight? And you said that it's going to be imperative that the school leadership is looking at this data and helping the teachers who already have so much to do.
It has to be a collective effort, Mrs. Friedrich. We're not that teacher. If I'm seeing, as I'm talking to you, hey, did you see Mary today in math class? Sometimes we're in the hall exchange, and I come back and say, Mary was demonstrating the same thing. I would hope that some type of communication gets forwarded to the counselor or someone else on the campus to say, hey, can you pull Mary for a minute and have a talk? I know Mary gets along well with, I'm Mr. Smith. I'm pulling you in this, Mr. Smith, right? And maybe Mr. Smith comes in and has that conversation or takes a moment at lunch. What may change with some of this, depending how we operate with COVID, at certain grade levels, Mary may be with that same teacher for a prolonged period of time.
True.
So that's going to be something that we're going to have to say, how is that school going to operate under that context? Do they send a communication that it's now 11 o'clock and I have relocated Mary, I've modified her instruction, can I get someone just to come by? And that's going to have to be a way that we do a communication, staying within the guidelines of FERPA, that we're not pushing children's names out there on email. And what I did in the past was something real simple. Write a note, staple it, and have someone bring this down to a guidance counselor to ask if they can come back to the classroom, right? Hey, can you stop by? Don't be detailed about it because children will look, but try to do something in that accord. And I think we have to work with our principals to have that a little more of that mindset on what can we do, especially if we shift or limit student movement. We have to be creative at how we do. We can't just keep doing it the way we did.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Also, I do agree with Dr. Straddles in that regards. And what concerns me as well is on the level 1, if the kid was not put out, she began to start answering my questions, because what happened is I also am concerned that if we have too many level 1 infractions, then I don't want to build a paper trail on the kid because they're not having the conversation. So some of that burden must go on the teachers, because we must hold teachers accountable, because that is a part of their functioning of their job. Classroom management is a part of their evaluation. So at some point in time, if I see that little Will is acting up, or little Will is acting irregular, and he's not being himself, then it is my job as though teachers are we're all basically what do you call what's the word I want to say?
Mandatory
reporters? We're required to if someone reports something, we're reporters. The same way we're required to report things when people come and tell us, then we should go to bed at night knowing that this kid has been acting funny for a couple of days and not saying something, and this little kid could be acting out because he's being molested at home or something. So once again, we have to put the burden on the teachers as well, because the teachers are seeing the kid and they're seeing the kid behavior. And my thing is for us, not to allow it to go from a level 1 to a level 2, or from a level 1 to a level 3 because we're frustrated with the kid. Or we just say, well, you know what, every time we come in, we're just going to document. I'm hoping also that with the level 1, as she said, the same way how a student can send a letter to the student might take a letter to the guidance counselor, is the same way the BMS could possibly be plugged in on this right here and pull the kid out. And the BMS, I know part of their function of their jobs, if I'm correct, is to build a relationship with kids and kids who are having an inappropriate behavior, to start seeing and start really understanding what's going on, so they can let the higher authorities know if they may need to, there's a real social emotional piece going on there. So that is my concern, that we're not using level 1 to just fill up paperwork on a student to get them out of the school. Because I've seen that a lot of times too, where some teachers are just frustrated with one student in particular, and every time he or little Johnny does something, she puts him on paper. We have to hold teachers accountable because it's deeper than that. Go ahead.
Ms. Smith, can I just add to that? So our behavior management specialists do have access to Educator's Handbook, and they do monitor that throughout the day. So they're able to provide interventions to support the classroom teacher. So if this is a behavior, it's not just on the classroom teacher. You've got that additional support that checks in to say, hey, I noticed that something is going on this morning. I saw you had an issue in Dr. Campbell's class. I saw you had an issue in Dr. Stratus' class. Maybe you need to take a few minutes and just talk with me, just to have someone to check in. And just to add, we may go back and add to this document something about mandated reporting, just so that parents are aware of our responsibility as mandated reporters and how we are using our expertise in that area to be able to support students. So if we have a student whose behavior has changed recently and we're providing those additional interventions, at some point, someone should have come across some information that says, hey, this is something that I need to be either reporting to the Department of Social Services, or we need to get law enforcement involved. So I just want to share that as we are having this conversation, that's something that Dr. Campbell and I are conversing about adding to this document.
And Mr. Smith, I also want to mention in the matrix for our level 1s, you will see the support from school counselors, social workers, and BMSs. It's in that matrix. We wanted to make sure that we have those wraparound services. When I stated before, the level 1 is really to keep the student in the classroom. We're not trying to suspend them. We're not trying to put them in ISS, that they're receiving that instruction with those wraparound services. So when you look at the matrix, you'll see that support in each of those columns.
Thank you. That's what I was going to say too, Dr. Campbell. If you look at progresses as well, Mr. Smith, as the occurrence continues to happen, the amount of interventions that we provide that student trying to come up with a plan to help them also increases. The documentation is not for the point of building a case against the student, but it's for building a case to help the student stay within that classroom environment for learning.
But I do like the idea of adding that component about the mandatory reporting. I think that's
I do too.
So thank you for that.
Yes.
I agree.
Mr. Campbell?
I think that's already added in terms of what's expected of the classroom teacher. You can put anything on there you want, but this goes back down to the culture that we're trying to develop. And that culture is a team concept at the tier 1 level. And that team concept is what will ease the pain of that same classroom teacher that has to write it up 20 times in September. By April, she's not writing up anything at all. And that's the idea behind the whole concept. But it does take due diligence early to get this concept to work, and along with communication amongst the team that supports that individual student. If I understand it correctly, every student has their own individual team, although they may never convene, but that's the 80-90% of the students that have this support system when they need it, if they need it. And if their classroom teacher is covering her tier 1, initiative by calling or writing a note, whatever, that communication at home and amongst the other teachers, it never goes to tier 2. And that's why we're we're banking on this concept, and I like the idea. But as Tricia said, the follow through, the monitoring, Dr. Strata says, is also key, because not only are you going to find out, you know, where the students are going and when they're falling through the crack, but you're also going to find out why in terms of your overall administration in the building. I think the concept is great. We just have to make sure it works, and we know it works, so it wouldn't be, you know, generally accepted. We just need to make it work for us.
Dr. Stratos, we've talked about the importance of this team, and there's no doubt about it. Behavior management specialists, social workers, supporting the teacher in the classroom to change the culture, to get to the root of the problems. So I must ask you, does every school have a full-time behavior management specialist, and does every school have a full-time social worker?
I don't believe every school has a social worker full-time. My understanding, most schools do have a BMS, some schools have two.
And some schools share a BMS, is that correct?
Yes.
So what is the plan that if this team is actually going to be there to support the teachers, so that, like Mr. Campbell just said about maybe not having to get to level 2, what is the plan to ensure that there is a team like that, as stated in the Code of Conduct, to support every school?
So beyond the BMS and social workers, if they are not provided a school site, a full-time person in either of those positions, the expectation would be that administration on that campus, right, are able to fill those needs up until the time we're able to extend additional personnel, right? Because we cannot not operate under the context, I don't have people for, so we have to look at building everybody's capacity. And if it's a smaller school, I don't mean any disrespect to my colleagues, but at a smaller school, the administrators should be able to pick up, at least the assistant principals with proper training, that they should be able to pick up and implement up until the time that we feel as a board that we're able to fund additional positions for full-time social worker and BMS at every school. That's something we would have to look at budgeting. But my perspective was to develop this plan rolling out without incurring more expenses, with the exception of the SD, social emotional learning component, because we need that. We need to have that embedded in. But training the administrators to effectively work and utilize their current resources to the best of our, their capability, to be direct, Mrs. Friedrich.
Yes, I think being direct is the only way to be. So
I have to be, yes.
That's why I asked you, because
yes, ma'am.
I think that these are, if you're going to roll out a plan, and it's a good plan, everybody. Thank you for all your time. There's no doubt it's a good plan, but I think that when you state that these are the supports and the interventions that will be made available for these students, and in reality they're not, then I think that's a conversation that needs to be had.
But I also feel that, and I'll say this, knowing Mrs. Swinton, the time that I do, and Dr. Campbell, these are ladies who do not say no. So if that, if that makes sense. No, I apologize, Mr. Campbell, but if a principal reaches out to either of them, something will be realigned and revisited, because we're actually trying to work with a high school who's come up with a creative idea on how we could re-look at some personnel of a school that has 2 BMSs, maybe that one of the BMSs part-time helps out at that high school with some targeted children and building resilience. So I will tell you that our team look at yes before they say no.
I have no doubt of that. And so no doubt whatsoever. But again, I think it needed to be said directly and asked directly. Mr. Campbell, were you going to say something?
I was going to say, when I spoke of team, I was not reflecting on the different tier teams and different possibilities for team. I was reflecting that student himself, one individual student, have a certain amount of teachers, and by extension, if need be, other support surrounding that particular student. Generally, and I agree with Dr. Stratus, and our goal should be to have the resources where it's needed. which means that if we have schools with 95% tier 1, the resources there won't be the same as a school with 60% tier 1. So when I stated team, I didn't mean that they have to have all extensions of a team component for a critical tier 3 student.
Right, point well taken. And just in Dr. Stratus's, example there, if a school has 2 BMSs and doesn't really need them, then where is it needed?
Can I add something?
Totally agree, Mr. Campbell.
So that's where we expect administration to monitor, slant, move around what we need.
I wanted to add something.
They can only do that if they're watching the data.
Yeah,
right.
Dr.
Campbell?
Yes. I know Mr. Campbell mentioned some schools with 2 BMSs. The schools that primarily have 2 BMSs are our Title I schools that purchase beyond what is funded at the district level. So I just want to mention that. So when you know about Title I, is based on needs and based on data, how you build in those additional interventions. And I just got confirmation that all of our schools do have a BMS, but not social workers.
Not a social work. But Dr. Campbell, just to share, there are a few who there has been additional allocation.
Got you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Mr. Smith?
I have 2 quick points. Well, one, I will say that maybe this is a time when we might need to think on the academic time that for schools who may not have full-time BMSs or part-time, that even at this time, this is probably the time to start talking about bringing hall monitors back. Because as a student growing up, I remember where we had hall monitors, for instance, when I was a student, Mr. Cole, and if William needed a cool down moment, when they called Mr. Cole, and Mr. Cole would come and get me and say, "Hey, what's going on with you this morning?" And sometimes he would start off, "What you have for breakfast?" And then he would go from there trying to understand what would be my plight or why did I feel the way I feel, or what was really going on. And some people may not see it as that, but hall monitors were very instrumental, and that may take some of the pressure off teachers. That Ms. Fidrich it seemed like she was kind of to help advocate for teachers, that teachers have a large amount of work, because I know she does have experience in teaching. So maybe this may be some time that way, maybe that we may start needing to start having that conversation, that certain schools may need to have hall monitors and to help be a part of the administration team in certain schools dealing with certain problems that may occur. So maybe to wrap that up, I think that this is possibly a time to start having our team to look at possibly bringing hall monitors to certain schools to be a part of the team to help get through some of these situations that may occur. And also with teachers, this is it's a tough thing to be trying to teach a class and having to make this documentation. But unfortunately, teachers may not like what I'm going to say, but that's what we pay them for, because their job is they're not just there to teach the students, but when they see these different behavioral going on, their job is to take notice and understand in the process what's going on. So I understand what Ms. Fidrich is saying, but I need teachers to understand when little Johnny has a underlying thing going on, and that when it's not normal behavior, so that we can get to the bottom of it and we can try to take care of it before it gets out of hand. That's all I'm going to say. But those are just some underlying things that moving forward, that I think that the hall monitor piece is the main thing. But I just want to say that we must start holding that, and not just teachers, administrators as well. To go back to what Dr. Scribes was saying, it's time that we start holding these people accountable. If they want to run their building, they want to be say that they have it under control, then now's the time to start showing it. And not sending students to alternative schools when they get enough of them, it's time to really start for us to start showing that we that's my plan, and that's my position with that. I think that's going to take everybody to working together and possibly even bringing hall monitors back in the building to make this thing function the way it should be. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Dr. Campbell, I see you're on slide 14 out of 29, and we have about 35 minutes left. So if you could continue, please.
And
You're on mute. Thank you.
This next one, I think we've addressed a great deal of this one already. We've talked about the mind shift to a consistent, progressive discipline matrix rather than a one-size-fits-all. We do have a little thing on the bottom of this that is important, and that is that school administrators still have that ability to look at mitigating and aggravating factors in keeping along with those principles that we have in our. This is you, Dr. Campbell?
Yes. Yes.
This is you, right? Slide 16?
Yes. So this is just a quick overview of the Progressive Discipline Plan Code of Conduct, making sure that administrators understand that this is just a guide. So it's a guide so that the outcome is that we're fair and consistent with our disciplinary actions. So our challenge is that, and I wanted to share just a quick story. When we were going through this process and we were vetting this through principals and assistant principals and teachers, we had this one meeting with assistant principals, and we gave them a scenario, like a discipline scenario, just based on our practices that we're currently under. And that scenario taught me a lot about the importance of what this process has done, as well as training. So in that, it was a scenario where kids did kind of like a level 2 offense. And we had some assistant principals, their discipline action was detention. And another group, it was 5 days out of school. So that's the work. When we were a part of that just candid discussion, it just opened my eyes to, this is the reason why we need this. So I do want to let you know that we're not taking anything away from administrators. They still have flexibility within each of the windows of the matrix. But the goal is that we're consistent. If something happens at one high school, that consequence needs to be similar at another high school. And we can't have detention in one school and being suspended for the same code violation for something else. So I just wanted to emphasize that. So in this PowerPoint slide, it basically talks about this being a guide, and the outcome is that we're trying to be consistent, but also providing the support for our our students, so that they're successful. So our Progressive Discipline Plan, as you've read, is broken into 4 different levels. It was imperative that we had a document that was developmentally appropriate for students. So we had experts in each of these areas. When we, created the actual plan, provide feedback and input for the specific matrix. I apologize. So in that, we have our early childhood, which is pre-K through 2, elementary 3rd through 5, middle school 6 through 8, and our high school 9 through 12. In each of those categories, there are 3 levels, and that is a shift for us in Beaufort County. We were operating under 5 levels. The state wants us in 3 levels. So that was really the work that we did, moving our codes to the appropriate levels so that it is aligned to the state and that we operate with the common language of level 1, 2s, and 3s. Also in that matrix, it talks about the intervention that is provided at each of the grade level configuration. And we've had conversations this morning about that, but I wanted to kind of lay out what is involved in the document. So level 1, which we've had a lot of conversations about, is dealing with the classroom managed offenses.
And so these are those behaviors that we were talking about a minute ago. They are the ones that interrupt classroom procedures or impede an orderly classroom. And I think we talked pretty much in depth about these. These are those minor incidences that we will be looking at through Educator's Handbook. They are still part of the progressive discipline matrix. So those services, interventions, consequences will progress as the behavior does. But this is level 1, classroom management. And some of those are things like cheating, cutting class, lying, tapping that pencil again, not being dress code, not following the direction. I want you to finish this, I'm not doing it. Horseplay, those things that really are part of almost every classroom that are easily managed with the right classroom management technique.
So as we move into our level 2, which is disruptive conduct, those are going to be the conduct that essentially endangers the health and safety of the student or someone else in the building. And these can be criminal offenses, so these can be leveled up. So from a level 1 can be leveled up to a level 2 if it needs to be reclassified, if it's occurred more than 3 or more times, I'm sorry. And then also just making sure that we emphasize that this can be school-based activities, but it can also be on our school buses, in our vehicles, or if we're having other school-sponsored activities. So if we're having a game and a level 2 violation occurs, a student can be disciplined based on level 2. And on the next slide, you'll see some of the examples of those levels, of those behaviors that are associated with a level 2. So you've got contraband, you've got a district medication violation, inappropriate language towards staff, inappropriate physical contact, stolen property, trespassing. When we get to the truant levels of chronic and habitual truancy, where you've got the social worker that has been involved and has already created a plan. The student may have been referred to our truancy intervention panel, but the truancy continues. Those would be a part of those level 2 disruptive misconduct that would be documented and disciplined in the system.
Our level 3s, these are the levels that give us heartburn. These are criminal offenses by our students. These are the offenses that will warrant either a student to go to an alternative placement or the worst scenario, being expelled from school. So many times our law enforcement or our SROs are involved in these offenses, and you know, we just follow the letter of the law in terms of this. A lot of times we don't really have the wiggle room. It's just if the offense has occurred and a proper investigation has been done by our principals and assistant principals, it pretty much spells out what those consequences are going to be. This is where we really need to spend some time as administrators in terms of training, making sure that we're giving our students the due process, that we're doing proper investigation, that we're asking for those, you know, statements from students. We're looking at videos, not just jump to the gun in terms of the offenses, because this could warrant students being removed from buildings. So I do want to emphasize that. Some of the examples of our level 3: alcohol, liquor, law violation, bomb threats, bullying, the list goes on. Pretty much to kind of sum up this is just violation of Safe Schools Act or any type of state reg around that are examples of some of the criminal misconduct offenses. So we said a lot this morning. Our goal is that we are fair, just, and consistent in all of the schools that we serve our students. That's pretty much our goal. Our goal is that we educate students, but our goal is that when something occurs, when there's disruption, that as administrators, we are fair and just and consistent, and we make decisions in the best interest of the students that we serve. We know that it's a school community, and in order for us to have, great learners, it's important that we, follow proper procedures, but at the same point, making sure that we keep the best interests of our students. So we mentioned throughout this training. We cannot accomplish this. We cannot get our outcomes if we don't have proper training. And it's not just our teachers and administrators. We're talking about, district administrators. We're talking about the support team, our social worker, our SROs, our BMSs, every intervention or interventionist that was mentioned in this matrix or document has to be trained on this new language. This is what we want to live by. We want to have a document that it involves all of the pieces. So we're not going here to get this document or here to get this document. Everything is centralized. So that is our goal. So we know that we have to be consistent with our language when we train. And we do know that we're in this COVID-19, and what is that going to look like? Just in conversation about the pre-planning for training, more than likely it will be a virtual training. So with that being said, we just need to make sure in our training that we are consistent, we have common language, that if there are questions, we try to answer that based on the information that is provided in the document. We will train our principals, assistant principals, teachers, counselors, social worker, BMSs, anyone that's identified in our document. We will develop a training schedule for them. So one out of this process and just working with our administrators, there are some key components to the training that we wanted to emphasize today. One, we really need to revisit our due process procedures. What does that look like at the school level? We say it kind of.
Ms. McKenzie, I think Dr. Campbell's frozen. Can you pick up from there?
Hello?
Oh, there we go. She's back.
Okay, sorry. We need to revisit the due process procedures for our administrators. That kind of came out of the sessions and the conversations over this school year. What does that look like? Almost having a script for each assistant principal so that that language is consistent, so that we can check the box that the due process was given to our students. I hate to hear, sidebars in our community that, well, they didn't ask me this, they didn't get the statement. So we need to make sure that this is embedded in our training, and that's our work that we want to do. We understand that students have rights, and that is also something that we provided in the document, is the right of the students. And so the due process is a right that students must have in order for us to be fair and consistent and get the outcomes that we want. The other is familiarizing our administrators with federal, state, and local regulations and policies and laws. They change sometimes, and we need to make sure that we have current regs in front of them. Just for example, when I started off this morning, I was just saying that we're going to update our administrative regs. Our principals need to have access to that, the governing piece, what governs what we do. So just making sure that we familiarize them on the federal, state, and local level. Dr. Stratus had a presentation, I think, that was presented to the academic committee. And in that presentation, there were scenarios for administrators. That is also going to be embedded in the training that we'll provide.
Dr. Campbell?
Yes.
That has not been brought forward. I prepared that for us.
Oh, okay.
I would have brought that forward, and it's already prepared for the administrators. They haven't had a taste of that yet.
I got you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry.
No,
So
don't apologize.
Basically, in that is similar to the small example that I provided, that we had our administrators break into groups with a scenario. How would you respond in terms of discipline actions? That's what we're talking about. Putting them in scenarios and finding out, well, how would you respond to this? And then using that document to kind of guide that work. So that is, I'm not going to say that's all of what will be embedded, but those are the three pieces that we really want to focus on when we provide the training for our administrators. So we have lots of next steps. We recognize that this is not a final draft. Any of your input that you provide, we want that. You are part of our stakeholders. So I count feedback as a gift. So please give us your gifts. So we're going to make any corrections or edits that we need to the document based on your input. We will replace our ARs with updated ARs based on the timeline that I provided at the beginning of the presentation. We will add additional legal citations. We realize that there are some areas of the document that needed the legal citation. So we're going to work with our legal counsel to provide that information in the document as well. After that is done, we will then let the legal counsel review the full document, provide input, changes, edits. After that is completed, we will have the final reading and review done with our communications department. I've already had a conversation with them. They're just waiting for the document to be finalized, or the final draft, and they will make those necessary edits. Once we have that document, we will then update our website, add hyperlinks, because we want this to be fluid in terms of changes to our regs and that sort of thing, as well as update our educator's handbook. So we talked briefly about that. So keep in mind, going back to the green sheet that we showed on the slide, so that green sheet does not encompass all of our state codes. So with that information is in our educator's handbook when teachers go and search for the codes. So what we have to do is update our educator's handbook codes so that it's reflective of what is in this document, so that we are aligned to the state. So that's the work that we have to do internally. And then once we do that, we will begin training all of our stakeholders and lay out that training schedule on what that looks like. So these are our big next steps.
Excellent. It looks very thought out. Mr. Campbell and Ms. Robine, I know that you both reviewed the 172-page document, as did I. So is this a good time, Dr. Campbell, to maybe dive into some of that? You did a great overview with a great explanation of all the planning and the process that you went through. So are you open to some of that feedback?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, Mr. Campbell, Ms. Robine, if you have anything.
One thing that stuck out to me is your the bus policy still got the 5 tiers.
Yes, so
Okay,
let me explain that. Can I explain that, Mr.?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Yes, I can explain it. So the transportation is a part of one of the administrative regs that we've not updated yet. Okay. If you look on the slide that we talked about, the conduct of students on the bus, it does refer to our 5 levels. This is a part of what we're going to change in our administrative regs. I did recognize that.
Okay.
So again, until they're updated, I don't want to put that updated in the document without it going through.
I understand. Yeah, we're still operating on.
Correct. And that's why I listed out those administrative regs that we referred to at the beginning of the presentation, and that was one of them. There were several that still use the old language with level 1, 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5s. We do recognize
that. Go ahead.
And that was SS119, student conduct on the bus. That's a part of that administrative reg.
So I had a question about the excused absences. On page 18, it talks about in order to receive a credit for high school course, a student must attend at least 85 days for a 90-day semester course. Do we need to add something in there for our first semester is, currently 85 days?
We can revisit that because I don't think that was written as an administrative reg, or was it? I gotta look, just a second.
I don't think it is. And that was the same question I had, that this is our, code of conduct. So I think that needs to reflect what our school calendar semesters
Okay.
look like.
Gotcha.
I mean, it's a good catch.
I think the language has to be respect to recognize that high school credit courses are not by day, but calculated by hours.
Yeah.
Right.
And that we are meeting the requirements. So we have to put the language in a context that
Dr. Stratos, we keep losing you.
we have to put the language in a context that the general public will understand as what we say, and not too complicated, Dr. Campbell. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because the days are not the issue as much as the hours in relation to Carnegie units.
Right.
Separate from the point that we do have proficiency waiver that has been approved for both face-to-face and virtual, right? So, but this isn't the place for all of that.
Right. Are you saying that we ought to write it in terms of percentage of classrooms time?
In order to earn high school credit, a student must be in for 100, I want to say 120 hours.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So it shouldn't go by days, but when you calculate the time in the calendar, have you been in that course, high school, right, high school bearing credit course for the necessary hours?
Right. Because our high school courses are more than an hour long.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, that's why I would just take that out. Don't refer to days at all, but put that in.
Mrs. Robin, I agree with you because it gets too much.
Yeah.
I'm taking notes.
Okay.
I had a question. I'm sorry,
also
Mr.
have a
Smith,
question.
go ahead. Please,
Yeah.
go ahead.
When it comes down to the to her goal, I think her goal it was that Ms. Jones was reading. I mean, Ms. Campbell. Our goal consistency with the district. I was wondering, could you put the district in there, because I would like to see somewhere in writing that is implemented, that is very important for that there's consistency in all behavior.
Then.
I mean, there's consistency in all punishments across the districts. That we're not just tapping students for basically we're giving students warnings for drinking on north of the Broad and south of the Broad. We're putting them out of school. So I need something in there that can be measurable and something that holds the district across the district accountable for how we are disciplining students. And I was listening to you read, but you said consistency. I need maybe consistency across the district and our goals.
Are you referring to a certain page in the document, or are you referring to our PowerPoint?
PowerPoint.
Our PowerPoint.
Yeah, the PowerPoint was just an overview of this document. So
Okay.
what we're doing now, we're going through this document, like any edits. So if there's something in there about the goals, I was looking at, I don't know if you were talking about the mission and vision, or.
It can be the mission, the vision. I don't care what it's in, but what I would like to see in there, if it's not in there, is we will have consistency in our we will have consistency across the district in punishment. Something along the lines of that right there, because there's been a lot of times when, and that has brought this conversation on, that there's not enough consistency in the district when it comes to the behavioral process. And that's not fair and objective to teachers. We're not being sensitive to all teachers' needs across the district, as well as we're not being fair to all students and parents of the community. If we're allowing Bob to get away with, for instance, drinking, smoking on campus, and at May River, but then at Beaufort High, we're putting students out. There must be something that said that as a district that we're giving our word and our mission is to be consistent across the district on behavioral issues on every level.
I think page 5 is where we could do that, Dr. Campbell.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, Kiki, either 5 or 6, put it into there, or possibly both.
I was thinking that too. I've already circled that page.
Okay.
Because of it, and I don't mean to be well, I do mean to be straightforward, but I don't mean to be, if I'm seeming to be a little aggressive on that, I'm just trying to be expressive because I don't want to be no misunderstanding exactly to what I'm expecting as a board member, because that's something that has to start from the board down to y'all, down to the superintendent, down to staff, that we must have a level of expectation to be the same across the district. That the head of the household needs to establish that, if that makes sense. Mrs. Stratos, I see you. Dr. Stratos, I see you pointing your hand up. I know you're gonna put me in place. Go ahead.
No, I'm not, sir. I'm not Mr. Smith by any means. What I would like is the idea that we have a mission and vision for the student code of conduct.
Right.
I think that's something, a sideboard that I wrote in, so it can go after our district's mission and vision. But I do want us to recognize that there are mitigating circumstances that we also have to recognize that's unique to that child, that I may have undergone some experiences this morning that you didn't. And I would hope that the school administration recognizes that when I acted out, it was take that time through what Dr. Campbell said, due process, that you talk to me, speak to me, and recognize that maybe I had an altercation with my stepfather. Maybe I got in between my stepfather and my mother, that those type of conversations happen, because that's when it's mitigating. I think we need to understand the needs of that unique child. That's all I'm saying. But to speak to what you're putting forward, Mr. Smith, one of the notes I wrote back is that we should be doing a monthly review at the district level of discipline in regards as we roll this out, right? Now let's look at, you see, so that's one of my to-dos. I'm giving our guys our after action review commentary now, but I think we need to recognize that needs to happen as well.
And if I can add here, I think that I know for a fact from being an administrator that there are mitigating circumstances. And in that review of the, if you do a monthly review, and if they're seeing something out of place, that's the time that you ask for the evidence, or, why is this different? And so that you know that it has been looked into, and that there were and there was a response, an appropriate response to support that student through because of the mitigating circumstances. It can't, when you are giving out discipline, it's not a one size fits all. It just isn't.
Right. And that through doing monitoring, I apologize.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Sorry, Mr. Smith, Dr. Stratos?
But by conducting monitoring, then we could identify patterns. And if it's a pattern of disproportionate practice, or you see something that's an outlier, that's how you could determine, are we fairly administering the consequences?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yes.
I would think that would be the overall goal of all that what we're doing, so that we can tailor our programs accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
One of my, real pet peeves is the achievement gap, and unless we can focus in on what the needs are, we can't make any adjustments to the programs. And that adjustment may also be a different template for the discipline. But all of that is document and data driven.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Mr.
And
Smith?
my last point also is that in the future, I would also like to see parents and students involved, such as stakeholders, so that we can have buy-in to this. Because it's to make this actual plan work, it's going to take buy-in from everyone, from the stakeholders, the community. Everyone's got to buy into this to make this is going to be a team effort to make this plan work. I mean, not to take nothing away from the team who've worked on the project. This is great, but I would like to see possibly some parents involved in this, and also students. And I understand due to the covert that it would possibly one of them couldn't be involved, but I mean, if possible, we can get some parents and students involved in these types of activities. I would definitely appreciate it. Just to get a different look of how to seeing things from their angle as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Campbell, may I ask you about page 11 in the document?
What page?
Page 11, under privacy and property rights.
Yes.
Okay, in that paragraph, it is down toward the bottom, and it says the use of personal electronic devices by students during school hours is not permitted.
Yeah.
Right. We know that many teachers allow students to use their personal cell phones to access Kahoot or different programs.
So,
how are you reconciling that statement with practice?
That's a good one.
Dr. Campbell, I'll get you off the hook on that. My notes actually say, I don't mean disrespect, but it says when it's teacher directed.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's the language.
That's not in there.
No, because it's in this document here.
Okay.
That I spent time with as well.
Got it. Okay, so that will say, it will have that additional language.
It needs to be in there. Yes, ma'am.
Thank
100%. Yes, ma'am.
Right. Mr. Campbell, Ms. Robine, anything else?
No, I think we've covered as much as we can cover within the 2 hours.
If I may just quickly, on page 17, oh my goodness, where did, the very top of the page, consequence. I see the word offenders. Is that the language, the tone that we are, or can we change that word perhaps? It says offenders will be dealt with. Perhaps, I don't remember reading, is the word offenders elsewhere in the document? And if so, I mean, it might be a little,
yeah, so that came from the truancy piece that we copied in, so we can change that so it reads well with the matrix that we have.
And maybe it's truants.
Yeah, that wasn't our words. It was just what came from that truancy policy.
right, but this is our document.
Yeah,
so
yeah. We can change
got it. Okay, got it. Okay. Right. Anybody else? Mr. Smith, Ms. Robine, Mr. Campbell?
Well, one of the things that I noticed quite a bit in the level 2 and level 3 was contact law enforcement. And my question is, how does the SRO relate to that particular exercise? And when you say contact law enforcement, in my mind, you're driving it right to the sheriff's department, past the SRO. Is that what you intend, or is the SRO a part of that?
Yeah, the SRO is a part of that.
Then I suggest you write that in.
Okay.
Because with the greater debate going on with the use and value of the SRO, writing them in as a part of your interventionist program, particularly since they are on some of the teams and will be on some of the teams for intervention, you are still keeping it primarily school-based first, which in my mind is, although it's law-driven and it's against the law what's being alleged, the SRO still should have at least an initial contact in my mind.
Yes,
And
make
it
that
just looks a
adjustment.
lot softer too.
Yeah, and some of them do specify SRO and
Yeah,
others don't.
some of them do,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
a
I
significant
would,
amount
yes,
just ignores the SRO, period.
I agree.
I think that's an easy fix, Dr. Campbell. We can go back in and insert those.
Yes,
We just have to keep in mind the ones that are threat assessment related, because that does require law enforcement.
Law
The
enforcement.
SRO may be a part of the team, but it may rise to that. So we just got to make sure to keep that differentiation.
Well, we understand that all of those things that you have contact law enforcement are primarily criminal activities. But do you call the sheriff in before you talk to the SRO about it? If you're an administrator? I mean, in my mind, that's kind of undermining the SRO's role, first of all. And if we need to do that without the SRO, the minimum use of the SRO would make them, negotiable. And I want to tend to think that the SRO are significantly important. So, and we're talking discipline and corrective measures. So that's why if it drives us to the courthouse, fine, but we're not going to put the things in there that tell us that it's going to drive us to the courthouse. We're going to put things in there that tell us how we're going to deal with that student in that situation. And in my mind, the SRO is the first link between the schools and the sheriff department and the law.
Okay. All right. Well, I think I speak for everyone when I just really thank you all, the team, for this monumental task. We hope that the percentage of teachers that may be leaving Beaufort County School District due to behavior will decrease because of this. And so thank you very, very much. It's very impressive. And well thought out. So thank you. Wendy, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. Mr. Campbell, you are exactly right. And I wanted to just cite briefly to you in Reg 43-210, it does state that specifically, Mr. Campbell, and I appreciate you saying that, because a school resource officer, when law enforcement referrals are required, a school resource officer shall be the first line of contact for local law enforcement to ensure that the matter is resolved expeditiously to decrease significant interruption in the learning process. So whenever that we have a level 3, the school resource officer should be called first.
Right.
So, yeah, that's right. And I also wanted to let you all be aware of something else that is a wonderful resource for us. Is if y'all can see this, last year in April, Sergeant Schmucker with the Beaufort Police Department, the South Carolina compilation of school discipline laws and regulations. So we've gone through there and cited those regs and statutes. So we'll continue to work on this. And I just wanted to tell you all this. I appreciate so much that this school district is looking and going to develop these interventions and to have being in local parentis and looking to help these children so that we can start at the very beginning and help the children so that these problems that they're having or that it doesn't escalate, so that we can prevent serious consequences and help get the services they need. And there's a really great team here working to help these kids, and I just appreciate it. So thank you.
Wendy, can you tell me the reg? Can you repeat the reg number that you quoted?
So
this wanted to look it up.
Yes. And so this regulation went into effect. Some of these revisions were made from May 24th of 2019, and it's Reg 43-210. It's about school resource officers.
Okay.
And what I've been doing is when these memorandums become due with the different police departments, we're incorporating this into the memorandums of agreement to talk about the importance of a school resource officer is a positive role model for our students. And our school resource officers also provide education to our students and their community liaison. So they have a very important role in our school district. It's not just discipline, it's also education. But it's 43-210 is what
Thank
it is.
you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Wendy, for all your work. And again, everybody on the team, Karen, you know, from you starting this 2 years ago to bringing it to fruition with the district level team, and it's fabulous. So Dr. Stratos, do you need a motion from this academic committee to bring this forward to the full board?
Yes, ma'am, we would like the opportunity to go forward so we could start rolling out a task calendar for PD, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. To that end, is there someone that would like to make?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I move that we bring it forward to the full board and recommend adoption of the new policy with
Mr. Campbell, can you say that one more time? I lost you.
I make the motion. I'll move. So.
Okay. Okay, so moving to recommend what's the whole name of this again? The progressive?
Consistent, progressive
discipline plan, student code of conduct.
Okay, so you recommend to the full board to approve the progressive discipline plan student code of conduct.
It's the reg is SS16.
S16.
So Wendy, what does that mean though, as far as, should that be part of this motion?
Not the code.
No, it's not SS.
That's not SS16, that's students with disabilities.
Oh.
No.
The code of student conduct.
So the code of conduct
is
SS18.
That's correct.
SS18, sorry, yeah. SS18 is code of student conduct.
Okay.
Okay.
SS18, yeah, thank you.
So thank you, Molly. The motion to recommend to the full board the progressive discipline plan student code of conduct, and you want it to include the SS number?
SS18, if that's okay with the rest of it. Administrative regulations, SS18.
ARSS18. Okay. And Molly, if you could, can you please capitalize progressive discipline plan student code of conduct? That way we know it's a particular document.
Yeah.
Mrs. Fridrich,
Yes, ma'am.
will we recognize then that we still have some ARs that are cited that will be updated, and we will bring that forward to the full board? And
Yes,
okay.
yes, let's, I will mention that in the
thank you,
academic
ma'am.
committee report. And Mary, you and I had talked about bringing them forward today. However, the information I received is that they would be available for the next academic committee meeting.
Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Cushenberry spoke with me, ma'am.
Right. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And it's SS-18.
Yes.
To lend to that with the next, will we keep the July 15th date?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
We have Wednesday, July 15th at 2:00.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, Kathy, are you seconding the second?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, any
Vote.
more
Yes.
discussion?
I guess
Yes.
my discussion is, are we recommending that this PowerPoint be presented to the full board, or?
No, can I make some adjustments before it goes to the full board?
Of course.
Yes.
So,
Of the
Kathy,
PowerPoint.
The Powerpoint.
yes,
Well,
so I think the motion just deals with the plan.
Yes.
And-
And yes,
Presentation,
okay.
yeah.
Okay,
Right. Yep.
sounds good. All in favor? Good. Thank you,
Yeah.
Molly.
Aye.
Okay, so Kathy, to your point, Dr. Stratos, at Tuesday's meeting, at the academic committee report, I will make sure that I say that there are some ARs included in this plan that are in the process of being revised, and we'll bring to the next academic committee meeting for, but that we approve the plan.
As is.
Yes, knowing that there'll be some changes.
So we can prepare the listing of the ARs that are being addressed. It is already in the PowerPoint. And then if we can let the team visit and just refine some points for the board doc meeting on the
Yes.
PowerPoint, so they could upload it by tomorrow, latter part of tomorrow, if that's agreeable.
That sounds agreeable to me. Kathy and Mel?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
We'll have that extra dialogue.
And also to recognize, I don't know how you all want to do this, but when you're at the board, that the teacher foreman, Miss McKenzie, her work's been so invaluable in preparing for this.
If I may share, Wendy, I've asked Dr. Rodriguez to put this under student achievement.
Uh-huh.
So I believe we would extend the invitation for Ms. McKenzie, for Mrs. Swinton, as well as Dr. Campbell to lend for the presentation. Are we supportive of that?
Yes,
That Miss
absolutely.
Yes.
So that may be on Wednesday
idea.
versus Tuesday?
Yes. I know it's on our agenda, right?
Yes, ma'am.
The code of conduct. I don't know that we'll get to it. You know, we're doing a 2-day meeting. So I don't know if it will, we're stopping the meeting at 9:15 and then reconvening the meeting on Wednesday, July 15th. So I don't know if we'll get to student code of conduct on the 14th or not.
To that question, Tricia, what time is our meeting?
On the 15th,
Yeah,
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock.
okay. So I just trying to mesh the two ideas. Yeah, I mean, instead of saying it would, we may have already have looked at it by the time we discuss it in a board meeting. The ARs.
That's true.
Yeah.
A good point, Melvin. You know, in the beginning, the board meeting was just scheduled for Tuesday and our meeting was the next day. So very, very true. We'll have to be a little fluid with that.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm just saying, you may not have to. Same conversation, yes,
Yes.
but maybe a different kind of pitch, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well said. That's true. All right. Any other comments or points to make?
Thanks for everyone's work. I think it's critically important that we had such involvement from the teachers, I think.
Yes.
I think at least we know we have 30 people who understand where we're going with the discipline.
Yeah.
Just need another 3,000.
So bad.
I just have a way of putting it all in perspective.
Thank you all.
Right. I'd like to
Thank
thank you, Kathy, Mel, Mr. Smith, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.